one other thing that we haven't mentioned so far is another type of pregnancy loss, and that's abortion. Oftentimes we don't include that when we talk about pregnancy loss, and those individuals who are choosing to have an abortion, it's their right. They go in, they have an abortion for whatever reason. Again, it's their business, why they're doing it and why they need to do it. But nonetheless, there's a loss that has occurred. And so I think that that is such an isolating part, right? There's a taboo again over that, right? That the person, you did it to yourself, or it's against religions, or why would you go and do that? There's so many beliefs around that and so many judgments around that. But nonetheless, it's still a loss. And it's an area that I think is it's definitely less talked about than all the other areas. So what have you seen in terms of the Black and brown birthing community, specifically around the topic of abortion?
I'm so happy you highlighted this one, because obviously it's personal for me, as I've had an abortion before as well. And I 2 years ago, I decided to share my story on the podcast, and I put out a call on my personal Facebook and was just like, I wanted to highlight women who've had abortions, and I really didn't want to talk about the reason why, right? Your right to choose is your choice.
Right.
What I wanted to focus on is the healing, and how the healing is so similar as a traditional pregnancy loss or miscarriage, and really just highlight, that is the terminology they use in the medical system anyways. They call it a spontaneous abortion when you have a miscarriage.
Absolutely.
It's the same procedure that's used, a DNC from, when you have a miscarriage to when an abortion is done. So personally, I think that when I put that call out, do you know how many women dropped in my inbox? Just on my personal Facebook. I didn't even put it out on social media, willing to share their stories of abortion and healing and what that looks like.
Wow.
I mean, I got hundreds of women just on my personal page. So that let me know that this is a part of the pregnancy and infant loss and infertility community. Abortion sits right there. And we need to make sure that we normalize that message as well, and be willing to share those stories of how people have healed, how they grieve, how they overcome what abortion looks like, and how they can move forward with their journeys to parenthood, especially if they still want to become mothers at some point. But we it's still very much so a stigma. A lot of women, when I started to post about post the stories on the podcast, I did a full month of abortion stories, including my own, and I got some negative feedback from it. Some women didn't like the fact that I was saying anything about abortion in reference to a loss, but it's still a loss. And I try to get them to see it from a different perspective, is that, I'm not, we're not focusing on people's right to choose. That's their journey, right?
Right.
But the grief, the healing is the same. Let's normalize that part of the conversation.
Right.
So I'm hoping that, by talking more about abortion and talking about what the loss means to people and how they've healed and how they've overcome, helps continue to normalize the conversation, as abortion is a part of pregnancy loss, just like all of the other different losses that we have. So I personally feel like the conversation may be shifting, but it's still taboo. A lot of people still don't want to talk about it in the Black and brown community. And to be honest with you, if you would go and survey a lot of Black and brown birthing people, it's probably close to 2 out of 4 women have had an abortion.
I wouldn't be surprised.
A lot of the women who've had an abortion are married. So married or partnered up in a long-term relationship. I wouldn't be surprised. So it is extremely common. It's probably more common than pregnancy loss. We talk about the 1 in 4 number. It's probably even smaller than that when it comes to abortion. So I was surprised. Like I said, I put out one little post on Facebook, and I got hundreds of my personal Facebook friends and associates in my inbox wanting to share their story. It was overwhelming. So that lets me know that we have to have a safe place for people to share these stories, so that no different than other kinds of loss, that they don't remain silent about it, that we normalize the conversation of what grief and healing in loss looks like, even with abortion.
Right. I mean, people don't go around and say, well, let me get pregnant so I can go down the street and get an abortion.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just the simple fact, right? So whatever the reason why they've chosen abortion, there's grief behind that. There's loss behind that. There's a lot of times guilt behind that, and guilt can sometimes eat people up even worse
for years,
right? And handicap them from healing, right? So there's so many things that are centered around abortion that we need to learn how to let go of. The other piece is the physical piece, and I don't even want to spend a whole lot of time on that, but when we as healthcare consumers enter an abortion setting, right, a clinic or a doctor's office or wherever we're going, we're not fully informed when we walk into those spaces either about the outcomes, the potential physical outcomes that happen to our wombs, the potential, like I know so many incomplete abortions, right? Where the abortions don't happen completely. And now we have all of this trauma to the womb, having to go back into the womb a second time to complete the abortion, the overzealous abortions that are happening. There's so many different pieces, right, to this that create this continued stigma around it. It's the physical experience, right? The trauma that's held in the body from that experience. A lot of times people are experiencing this alone. And then there's the mental health piece that's attached to it. So it's just the same as any other pregnancy loss, because you're experiencing it physically and mentally, and certainly all of the pieces that make you a human being. So we need to definitely not continue to downplay this or categorize it as something else because it was a choice.
Nope.
Let me tell you something. This was happening way back when there wasn't an abortion clinic, okay?
Absolutely.
People were going to the house down the street.
Absolutely. And I think even we talk about access to care. I mean, our wombs and uteruses are always on the chopping block when it comes to legislature and in certain states, and let alone within our country. So a lot of states may only have one abortion clinic. So a lot of women are doing this, underground and doing all the craziness just to have the right to, have autonomy of their body and the choice that they make with their body. Right. And everything that you said is true about making sure that we continue this conversation around abortion and not put it to the side. It needs to be a part of the whole conversation around loss.